have also led, security teams for organizations, and implementation is not the only thing when you are a leader, especially in security, and especially with a thing which is as comprehensive as Mitre, and trying to actually be able to map it, doing this entire exercise, which can be huge for an organization. I'm sure you would have also faced this question that many of us in security teams do face, which is, what is the ROI, right? So what was the leadership expectation when you generally go ahead and implement a framework like the Mitre attack framework? And like, what was expected out of you? How did you actually go about and show them what the return was, what the value add was in terms of this?
Yeah, I think a lot of funny things happened at that point of time. But as part of my learning, what I'll try to do is I will try to answer it by basically I'll try to debunk some of the myths that management expects when we Mitre attack framework. I think that should answer the question. So myth number one is implementing Mitre attack or security tools that use this framework means organization is 100% protected from cyber attack.
Yay.
So I would say, yes, implementing Mitre attack framework means the organization is in a better position to detect a threat and at a very early stage of the attack. Okay. Because we can collate all these indicators of attack. For example, it could be a phishing email, it could be some recon from a particular IP address on a particular port, brute force against a particular user account, etc. We can collect all this information, combine it with the threat intel, okay, and combine it with the attacker group's information, which is available on Mitre, okay, and narrow down onto which attack group probably is attempting to target the network. Okay. So this is one way of using the attack framework. It is definitely not going to protect you 100%, but definitely it is going to help you to be in a better position, detect early and take the actions before a big compromise or a data breach happens. Okay. Similarly, when you are doing, red team exercise or a breach attack simulation exercise. See, one of the objectives of these exercises is to simulate the actual attacks that the attacker would do if they want to compromise your environment, right?
Yeah.
So they very closely, imitate or simulate the attacker behavior. Now, if you're going to focus on the attacker groups and which tactics and sub-techniques they use, that is what Mitre describes in that attack group section, then definitely you know how the attack is going to span in your environment, right? For example, nowadays we hear a lot of attacks where the VPN gets compromised first. That is the first thing that happens, okay? Now, how does the VPN get compromised? It is because of some user account, probably having their credentials leaked in some dark web forum. Okay, so that becomes a starting point. Use it on the VPN. VPN may or may not have a two-factor authentication. The attack is successful, right? Yeah. But if you use the same techniques and sub-techniques as part of your red team exercise, you are able to identify this as an attacker and take actions proactively rather than waiting for the actual attack to happen. So that's where, it is going to help organizations to make sure that you are well prepared to detect the attack at the early stage. The second myth I would like to talk about is that, to achieve 100% coverage, we must implement all techniques and sub-techniques. Okay. Now, I gave the quantitative analysis in my right? Now, you definitely cannot implement all of this. Okay? So, implementing the detection that requires security-relevant events from the right source is important. Okay. For example, if you want to implement, let's say you want to detect data obfuscation. Okay? And under data obfuscation, you want to detect steganography. Now, steganography, we know, is a very difficult thing to detect if especially if you don't have packet inspection or SSL or TLS, inspection for the encrypted traffic in your environment. And we know how much of, network bandwidth or network latency issues users face when these components are enabled. Okay. So then these are some of the things you just cannot detect unless you are able to put in those controls like packet inspection or SSL TLS inspection. Another example is, initial access. Under initial access, you have something called as trusted relationship. Okay. So if an attacker's objective is to abuse that trusted relationship, okay, and then get into your network, what it means is they will first compromise your second or third party vendors or providers. Okay. Typically, these providers are not in the organizational security stack. They are not in the organization's policy, right? And you can still see a lot of business sensitive information which we exchange with these vendors over emails or maybe over the shared drives, etc. Now, in such cases, we just have to rely on a threat intelligence feed. Okay. So if that particular vendor, third party or a fourth party, whatever that is, okay, gets compromised, we should have that intel coming to us as part of threat intelligence feed that this particular vendor providing a particular service has been compromised, and therefore we can invoke our IR and reach out to the vendor. But when you're building the detection rules in your SIM, for example, you cannot build a detection rule for this trusted relationship because that vendor is not part of your organizational security stack, not part of your organizational policy frame, right? So similarly, if you let's say if you have organizations which are highly regulated, they typically don't use public clouds, right? So the techniques and sub-techniques associated with cloud, such as cloud infrastructure discovery or cloud service discovery or modification to the cloud compute resources, misuse of unused cloud regions. So these are some of the techniques and sub-techniques associated with cloud, which are not applicable to that organization, and therefore they will be out of the Mitre implementation scope for them. Okay. So yes, there are a few techniques and sub-techniques that we cannot implement as part of the detection or security testing. And therefore, we should be cognizant about these before we start the Mitre journey. So definitely, if you are, definitely we cannot cover 100% of all the tactics and sub-techniques.
Right? Yeah, I think that's very well put and in a very structured format. I think some of the recent breaches we can clearly attribute to the trusted relationship that you were talking about. And it is only growing. It's a reliable technique for attackers and it will grow. It's very difficult to detect that. I think that's something that we're also seeing in other areas like supply chain security and other places where this the security that is there for your vendors is also something that is out of your control, right? So you can actually look at other things.
Yes. And I think the third myth that I want to cover is that if we don't implement attack framework, we cannot detect any cyber threat. Okay. So yes, Mitre is comprehensive. It is very granular, gives in-depth information about the adversary's behavior, but we can still detect these behaviors even if we don't have Mitre. Okay, because Mitre, like I said, came only in 2018. Prior to Mitre, we had Lockheed Martin's kill chain, which was widely used, and I think it is still in use because it's a little simpler and less complicated to understand the attack phase. So just because the organizations don't have attack framework doesn't mean they cannot detect the cyber threat. They can detect, it is just they have to make sure the right events reach the SIM and the detection logic is applied using those events.